piece of it, but the Reproductive Rights Act goes well beyond just abortion. It really goes to, again, making sure that the federal government is not telling you what to do. We arm you, or the state government, we arm you with the facts, and we hope we educate folks. We don't want folks to just go out and do the wrong thing, but ultimately, if we educate them, it's their body, it's America, you do what you like. So I did support that, and the governor, we just signed that bill, and that's coming to law. So, and the last thing, and I carried this bill in Springfield, and it's very important. We got our law enforcement folks in the back, and I didn't even realize this was as big an issue. There's a law, give it a round of applause.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of this too. We got to get off these cell phones when we're on the expressway and on the streets, because there's people hitting our police officers all the time, and they're dying or they're being seriously injured. So I've carried a bill, it's called Scott's Law, which requires that if you see the emergency vehicles on the road, that you have to move over, or it'd be additional fines. So just keep that in mind when you see them on the expressway. You don't have to move over. You got to at least decelerate and slow down some. But we have to protect these folks because, I mean, they're dying. I mean, it's really an epidemic, not just here, but across the nation, really, quite frankly, across the world, distracted drivers. So that's like a quick overview of some of the things we worked on. But again, you can't operate the state without dollars, and that's why I really asked Cameron to be here, and he's one of the governor's top folks with regards to understanding this issue. He's going to do a quick PowerPoint. And then after that, Charles will talk about Lieutenant Governor. Then I'll answer any of your questions. Ask us any questions you can. And again, after that, we'll continue down the agenda with our Commissioner Stan Moore. So, again, that's what I've been doing. And amongst other things, I've passed other bills. Again, LG Sims has passed a lot of legislation with regards to criminal justice reform. Going into the new session, one of my priorities will be workforce development. I was talking to a guy in California. He's a developer, and I was asking him about, communities. What do you do when you come to communities? And they look at discretionary income, and they look at household income. So we have to get more folks employed. So workforce development will be a big push of mine, and always criminal justice reform. So again, I'm going to be available for questions after these two guys. Thank you so much. Cameron Mock.
Thank you, Representative. Very well said, and just to let it be known, at least on behalf of the governor, a lot of what was accomplished down in Springfield this past session couldn't have been done without the representative and Senator Sims' help. So big thanks to them in helping pass what wound up being one of the, if not the most substantial legislative sessions in the state's history. So I really appreciate that. My name is Cameron Mock. I'm Chief of Staff to the Governor's Budget Office and Senior Advisor to Deputy Governor Hines. The fair tax issue is one that's near and dear to me, but even before I get into that, prior I worked for 4 years for Chicago Public Schools, and one of my main priorities that I helped negotiate on behalf of the city was the new state funding formula, which, as you remember, Chicago was an outlier in that the state didn't cover CPS pensions, and so through our work down there, we helped get right-size the formula so that they started recognizing that Chicago was being underserved by the existing formula. And so that's near and dear to my heart now in my position with Governor Pritzker. He has set forth a plan to continue to fund that formula so that we can make sure to drive dollars to our neediest areas, and specifically areas in Chicago. So before I get into the PowerPoint, just to lay it out, the fair tax, right now what we have in the state is a flat income tax. And so that is no matter how much money you make, you pay 4.95% of your income to income taxes for the state. And the problem is when you layer that on with all the other taxes, sales tax, property tax, etc., and you look at the whole body of taxes, when you look at the poorest individuals and the wealthiest individuals, you find that we have the 8th most regressive system of taxation in the country. That is, not only do wealthy people not pay the same proportion of their income in taxes in total, but they pay substantially less in taxes. And so while sales tax and other items like that, it's difficult to address the regressive nature of those, what the governor's put forth is a plan for income taxes to try and make that system more fair so that when you make more, you pay more. And ultimately, while it is a plan to help right-size the regressive nature of taxation, the state keep in mind the primary focus on this was to finally fix the budget problem, but we wanted to fix the budget problem not on the backs of working and middle-class families, but on those who have been advantaged by the existing system, who have done really well and not paid their fair share in taxes. So keep that in mind as we go forth. You know, this isn't a massive tax cut, although we'd like to provide additional support for middle and working class families, but the point here is to make the wealthy pay their fair share and get the state out of this fiscal mess. And in doing so, and getting out of this fiscal mess, keep in mind, the point is that when we have balanced budgets, we can provide money for critical services, for education, social services, criminal justice reform. All these things fall in line when you actually right-size the state's fiscal house. And so the attempt here is to stop cutting critical programs as the previous administration wanted to do, and actually recognize the problem and provide new taxes, increasing tax on the wealthy, so that we can fund our critical services. I'm sure none of you need reminding in the room, but just to lay the groundwork, over the last 2 to 4 years under the previous administration specifically, we amassed a multi-billion-dollar structural deficit. We actually at one point had $15 billion in unpaid bills that are actually accruing interest. And so that's particularly pervasive because not only are our vendors providing critical services for our families in the state, but what they were doing is providing services, and then we weren't paying them, and sometimes we're paying them for maybe over a year on end. And so they were looking at needing to close up shop, and it's really a moral problem that you go out and seek assistance from our vendors and our local social service agencies, and then you don't pay them for another year. You can't balance a budget on their backs. And the secondary issue of that is, of course, we have a Prompt Payment Act that requires that those vendors who are delayed payments accrue interest. And so not only are they looking maybe to close up shop, but then it's pushing the state further and further in debt. And in doing that, we accrued over $1 billion in interest penalties alone from, quite frankly, the previous administration sticking their head in the sand and saying this problem can be solved through cuts and efficiencies, when that wasn't the reality. So as I said, public safety, schools, they were all hollowed out as a result of this, and so it resulted in court orders, consent decrees, and so we're looking to get out of this mess, and here's the plan that the governor believes is the right plan forward. As I mentioned, option one, I apologize, the text is a little small here, but option one, across the board cuts. That would if you wanted to cut your way out of this problem, you'd need a 15% across the board cut. When you look at things like higher education, has been hollowed out, and actually funding levels are below what the levels were even in the early 2000s. So you have critical services that have gone unmet, year-over-year cuts. The governor does not believe you can cut your way out of this mess. He is always looking for efficiencies. He's tasked his cabinet members with coming forth with efficiencies in their agencies. He's doing what he can, bringing his business focus to providing some efficiencies, but efficiencies are not cutting critical services. And so this 15% across the board is not doable, it's not fair, and so we need to look at the revenues to be able to get us out of this mess. So option 2 and option 3, these are revenue options. Option 2 is if you wanted to increase the current flat income tax, you'd have to raise everybody's taxes by 20%. You'd have to go from 4.95% income tax rate to 5.95% income tax. And so that would, that would impact everybody, working class families, low-income families, and as I said before, we already have a regressive system of taxation. So why, when you're looking at generating the revenues, why would you further place burden on low and middle-income class families? So the governor does not feel it's fair to just increase the flat tax and therefore increase taxes on those who are already paying more than their fair share, those who are middle and working class families. So the governor has put forth this plan. Option 3 is the fair income tax. And this would ensure that 97% of taxpayers in Illinois would pay the same or less. If you make $250,000 in net income or less, you'd pay the same or less. And just for a point of comparison, if you're, say, a single mom, I believe with 2 kids, you'd pay $271 less than you do today. And if you were to, what's important to note is, even today, again, we have a $3 billion structural deficit. You can't look at the revenues we're taking in today and say, what would we pay under a new system if the new system isn't fixing the problem? So it's important to compare what you'd pay today under the increased income tax, flat income tax, versus the fair tax. And so that single mother under option 2, increasing the flat tax, would actually pay almost $800 less in income taxes under the fair tax plan than if you increase the current flat income tax. So that's important to keep in mind. Just visual representation, 97%. Again, I think we had some of the opponents on their heels a bit when the governor came forth and they say, so, liberal tax and spend Democrat. We put forth a tax plan that literally provides a tax cut for 97% of Illinoisans. And so now they're having to go to other arguments. They were expecting to basically be able to say, I once increases everybody's taxes, but that's not what we've done here. We've identified the 3% of folks making over $250,000 and decided they can pay a little more and get us out of this mess. Some other things to note in the bill that I think are important. The act was signed, so what was done in Springfield was the constitutional amendment was passed. Right now our Constitution says that you can only levy a flat income tax. And so the first thing that needed to be done is pass a constitutional amendment that said you can actually levy different rates on different incomes so that we can make the system progressive. The thing is that passed the General Assembly with the supermajority required, but now it goes to the voters. And now in November of 2020 on the ballot, you'll see a question that should the state be able to provide differentiated rates based on income. And that's important because without the majority of voters voting on that, we need 60% of voters, that doesn't get passed, and then we're back in this mess. And we have to look at existing alternatives, and the existing alternative without that constitutional amendment is increasing the flat income tax, which the governor does not want to do, and would increase everybody's taxes in this room, and it's not something that's fair. So look out for it in November 2020, very important, and we need the will of the people to speak once and for all and say that this is the fair thing to do. In addition, the governor provided an increase in the property tax credit. We know property taxes around the state, specifically in Chicago, have been a problem for years. Largely, it is a problem of underfunding from the state. Local communities have had to increase their taxes to make up for what the state has failed to make up on its end. So in order to provide some immediate relief, the governor's, actually in the tax plan, has increased the property tax credit by 20%. So you'll pay, 6% of the property taxes you pay, you'll get a credit back in your income taxes. And so that's to provide a little relief on the pervasive property tax issue. In addition, right now you'll see, I'll go into the rate structure later, but the proposal is that the top rate go to 7.99%. So right now they pay the wealthiest individuals pay a flat 4.95%. The proposal increases those making $1 million and more up to 7.99%. So, we're talking basically 3 percentage points under income. I know a lot of the wealthy say they're going to get up and leave. I would challenge that assertion. The packing costs and the moving costs associated with moving their families is going to exceed just the value of 3% increase in their taxes. So that's an argument that we simply don't buy, and that we think actually because it's going to close the structural deficit, even the wealthiest will be inclined to be there, because all of the services that their workers rely on for their businesses to be prosperous, they're going to be supported through this fair tax plan. So we think it's a reasonable thing for them to pay. In addition, the plan also includes for the first time ever a child tax credit. And that is, if you have a child and you're single making under $80,000 or married and make under $100,000, you'll get up to $100 per child in the child tax credit. So that's a way to focus some of the tax dollars and going back to those who need it most, supporting our working class families and their children. So we think that's an important piece of the.
Excuse me for interrupting. Alderman Mitchell just wanted to make sure that our 4th District Commander, she's in the back now. We have a new 4th District Commander on view.
Yeah, guys, and I'm really sorry to interrupt, and I hate that I missed her in the beginning, but she has been doing, Commander Boldness has been doing an excellent job since she's taken over. So I wanted you guys to at least get a glimpse of her.
Come on down front so we can see you. Come on down front so we can see you, because I got to figure out.
So I wanted to make sure you guys saw it. She's working excellent with both the 8th, the 7th Ward, and the 10th Ward. And we and supervisor, they really have our back. So I wanted to acknowledge her at this time. So, and she has to go and do some police stuff. So, all right.
All right, back to boring taxes. I'm going to go through, since it's fairly legible, if legible at all, basically what all these slides are just showing, the next 3-4 slides are showing, is just the comparison of taxes, what sample taxpayers would pay, and basically I'll just summarize what these slides show. In effect, it shows that working middle-class families will see, depending on if they have children or pay property taxes, could see up to several $100s back in their income taxes compared to what they pay today. And the wealthiest folks, you know, if you exceed $250,000, you may pay a couple $1,000s more. The millionaires will pay, I believe, up to $50,000 or in excess of $50,000 more in income taxes. So it's right-sizing that tax policy to provide tax breaks for these families. This again difficult. The tax you won't be able to read, but what's important to note is we're going from a flat tax to a graduated tax or a fair tax, and what that means is you have rates, a series of rates, and those rates only apply to the income made over each income threshold. So, for instance, the bottom rate under this plan is 4.75%, which is 0.2 percentage points lower than it is today. And that's up to $10,000 in income. When you exceed $10,000 in income, your whole income is not taxed at a new rate. It's only each dollar made in excess of the lowest bracket that is taxed at the new rate. So you have to blend all of these rates that you make on the dollars earned over each threshold to get to your total tax rate. And that's important because some folks, even I think it's clear here that you know, that this is likely a fair plan, but some of the folks say make in excess. There's some in the northern suburbs who think, you know, well, I make $300,000, I'm married and have 2 kids, and I don't view myself as wealthy, but my tax bill is going up, and they want to look at, and I'll show the rate structure, they look at the marginal rate they're paying of 7.75%, and they say, well, I'm currently paying 4.95% today, and you want to increase my rate to 7.75%, and when I make $300,000. And that's not actually the case. They're only paying the new 7.75% on each dollar over $250,000. So they're still getting a tax break on their first $250,000. They're only paying the new rate on the amount over. So it is gradual, and it's not a huge tax increase for most individuals. And so that's just important to keep in mind, and that's what this displays. I think if we want to, at a future date, we can get a printout or something so you guys can read through, since it's not legible up here. This just shows the rates here. Let's see. Right here you can see the rates I just talked about. The lowest rate is 4.75%. That's on incomes up to $10,000. Then the next dollar over $10,000 and up to $100,000 is taxed at 4.9%. Each dollar over $100,000 is taxed at the current 4.95%. And then each dollar over $250,000 is taxed at that 7.75%. And keep going along until you make over $1 million for joint filers or $750,000 for single filers. They'll pay 7.99%, again, only on each dollar over these income thresholds. So in addition, 97% of taxpayers will get relief. There will be a 20% increase in the property tax credit, and there will be $100 per child tax credit. And this just shows how these rates phase in, and these are income levels. So this is $1,000 and this is $1.2 million, and you can just see how the rates gradually increase. And then you hit $1 million, we figure you make enough, you can pay the $799, no reducing below that, and so that's where we're at.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. He sounded like he knew what he was talking about. And again, this is, and I asked him to do this because I really got to connect it to what we ask for on a daily basis. Alderman, fix my street. Why is school looking like this? Why do we have these issues? Why is the streets messed up? Why is Stony Island not expanded? All of these things get back to the state over the last 4 to 5 or 6 years sent less money to all of the cities. And this is something we don't really discuss a lot. We look at the cities, and even when the city raised the property taxes, you ask yourself a question, why are they raising the property taxes? Because under Rauner, we sent less and less money to the cities, and ultimately the cities have to operate. Not just in Chicago, because I've been all over the state. When I'm in Rockford, when I'm in Danville, Springfield, you name the town all around the state, all of them receive less money from the state. And then what ends up happening is that the cities have to, again, raise property taxes and have it. The governor of Pritzker wants to right-size that. He wants to send more money to Chicago, to CPS, to the Park District, so they don't have to resort to those things. So when you're looking for things to be done through the alderman, through the mayor, that the state is all one team. But we wasn't a team. It was the mayor was working by himself, and we had, again, a governor who wasn't interested in that, but Governor Pritzker is. So just moving along, Charles Watkins is coming up, the Lieutenant Governor. I was going to give some quick remarks, and then we'll go to questions about any state specifics before we go to our commission board. Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As Representative Evans mentioned, my name is Charles Watkins, and I have the very, very distinct pleasure of serving as Chief of Staff for Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. First, I'd like to thank Representative Evans for hosting this event, and I want to acknowledge the representative as well as Senator Sims for their very strong advocacy and their leadership and their partnership with us. The Governor's Office, the Office of the Lieutenant Governor, much of what has been discussed this far would not be possible without the General Assembly and leaders such as Senator Sims and Representative Evans. The Office of the Lieutenant Governor currently is structured in many of the same ways as it has been historically. However, the partnership between Governor Pritzker and Lieutenant Governor Stratton is something unique in certainly the lifetime of many of the people in this room, and certainly my lifetime. The things that the governor and the lieutenant governor talk about in terms of partnering and sharing the same vision for the future of Illinois is not just hype for the media, hype for the public. So we very, very closely align with the governor, the lieutenant governor, the governor's staff, and the staff in our office to move Illinois forward, to move the priorities of the administration, and work very closely with the General Assembly, both the House and the Senate, to make it all happen. This is, by many measures, a historic legislative session for Illinois. It hasn't been like this in Illinois, I don't think ever. And even looking at the rest of the country, the things that have happened, many of which Representative Evans very, very clearly laid out. Some I'm going to mention again and drill down on a few of them. So the notion of ramping to a state minimum wage of $15. The city of Chicago is already there, but as Representative Evans mentioned, most of the state is not. And it is going to have a real dramatic impact on the lives of Illinois residents throughout the state, particularly in non-Chicago areas. The Capitol bill that was discussed, approximately $40 billion over the next several years to improve the infrastructure, much of which has been crumbling, roads, bridges, and importantly, those projects are not going to be done magically. There are going to be people, there are going to be people and businesses that are going to be improving the roads and repairing the bridges and the other infrastructure projects. Those are going to be good jobs. Many of those jobs are going to be here in this district. Some of these projects are going to be here in this district, and some of the companies are going to be here in this district. And that's true all over the state, and that's a very, very positive thing to happen. The legalization of adult use cannabis, and And Representative Evans really spoke very articulately about the impact of that, how it's not just about smoking it recreationally. That's one of the reasons why the term recreational use is not what we're looking at it to be. But there's an important revenue component for the state. But what I want to highlight, and this impacts our office, the Office of the Lieutenant Governor and Lieutenant Governor Stratton, has to do with the community equity components of it. And I want to give a particular acknowledgement for the Black Caucus of the General Assembly, the Latino Caucus of the General Assembly, because they really fought hard so that we could acknowledge the damage that has been done on underserved communities. Many of those communities look just like us, black and brown folks, that were devastated by the war on drugs. And we want to do some things to impact that. So there is a strong community equity component of that cannabis, adult use cannabis bill. As the representative said, it is going to afford a ramp for expungement for many people that have been involved in the justice system and have convictions for cannabis-related offenses. There is a mechanism to provide access to the market, allow businesses, communities, entrepreneurs that are black and brown to enter the adult use cannabis market for licensing, for growing, and the downstream things, security, transportation, things that black and brown entrepreneurs and businesses currently in the medical marijuana, they are not provided that access, or they have not had that access. This is a really, really significant issue. The other thing that, again, I want to acknowledge the Black and Latino caucuses for really fighting hard for this, and that has to do with what we call our Restore, Reinvest, and Renew initiative. There is a board that there's going to be funding in the net of the cannabis revenue. There's going to be approximately 25% that is going to be used to invest in communities that again, that have been traditionally underserved, have high percentage of violence, and they really need to be invested in. And so what we call the R3 board, the Restore, Reinvest, and Renew board, is going to get a net 25% of the revenue from the cannabis, and will provide grants, funding to designated communities after looking at the data on violence and many other very important criteria, and they will be eligible to compete for grants from the R3 board, which is being chaired by Lieutenant Governor Stratton. These things are game changers. So it's not just a matter of adult use cannabis is going to be presented. It has medicinal value, is going to help fund community investments, is going to provide opportunities for expungement for many people that have been impacted and involved with the justice system. And we're very, very proud of all of these efforts. Another very significant effort in this same vein is what we call our Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative. That was an executive order signed by the governor that allows the lieutenant governor in our office to convene any state agency to look at criminal justice reform, look at equity issues, wherever they may lie in state government and in the state, and really, really look at a restorative nature of our justice system in Illinois, whether it is cash bond reform, sentencing reform, all manner of things. And we fortunately have very progressive and enlightened agency directors that are going to be working with us to really address these issues. Let's see here. I think I'm going to stop at this point because I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions. There are more presentations, so thank you very much.
Of course, it's the most important part. We'll go to questions. But before You all see Lieutenant Governor Stratton on TV with the governor and have you, but when the election initially started, her conversation was she just wasn't going to be like a pretty face to be used as a tool, that she wanted a substantive place in government. And you know, the people love black women when they're voting, but they don't always give them the real authority to utilize their brain. And she mandated that Governor Prisk could do that, and we all had talked about that. And that's been the case, you know, like even if you don't see her, she's behind the scenes working with us on legislation. We've talked a million times about whether it be cannabis or any of the criminal justice reform policy. She's an attorney. She used to work with a lot of organizations. So that restorative justice piece is very important, and Lieutenant Governor working. So give a round of applause as representative. I think he's the tallest person in the state too. I think he's tall. He's the second tallest man. He's a tall guy. So, of course, if you don't want to ask your question today, you don't have to. But this is the moment for questions. Any input that you have, the camera can take back to the governor and to the lieutenant governor, and for myself. So the mic is there. Anyone would like to ask any questions?
Good afternoon. My name is Melvin Jones.